Most women believe love means holding on. But the truth is, the most powerful love, the kind that rearranges destinies, never clings. It moves like water. It flows. It leaves. It returns, transformed. Imagine a woman standing at the edge of the sea, trying to cup the waves in her hands. The tighter she grips, the more it slips away. This is how most people love, desperately trying to possess what was only ever meant to pass through. Clinging is not love. It is fear dressed in devotion. It is the trembling need to control what reminds you of your own incompleteness. The ancient poets knew this. They called it illusion. Modern psychologists call it attachment. Alan Watts simply called it the game of hiding and seeking, where love hides and the self seeks, never realizing they are both sides of the same coin. To love without clinging is to risk everything, because you can no longer use the other person as a mirror to prove your worth. You can no longer say, if he stays, I am lovable. If he leaves, I am not. The ground beneath your illusions begins to crack, and what's left is terrifying. The raw presence of yourself. The woman who learns to stand there, unanchored, unpossessed, becomes dangerous because she has nothing to lose. In the beginning, love feels like a fire. It consumes, it promises eternity, it demands surrender. But what burns brightest often burns fastest. The immature heart mistakes intensity for intimacy, chaos for chemistry, and possession for proof. But love, real love, is not the hunger to merge. It is the freedom to remain whole, even in togetherness. You can feel the shift, can't you? The moment when what once felt like union begins to tighten, when his affection turns into measurement and your giving becomes currency. The mind starts to whisper, what if I stop giving? What if he stops wanting me? And so the performance begins. You give to stay needed. You please to stay chosen. You soften your edges, silence your fire, and call it compromise. But beneath the mask, something sacred dies. The irony is cruel. The more you try to keep love, the more it suffocates. The more you loosen your grip, the more it breathes. Detachment is not indifference. It is clarity. It is the realization that love cannot grow in a clenched fist. When Alan Watts spoke of detachment, he never meant apathy, he meant trust. To trust that life and love are tides, not prisons. So what does love without clinging look like? It looks like two beings meeting in truth, not need. It is presence without pressure. It is wanting without owning. It is standing beside someone, not leaning on them. It is not saying, you complete me, but rather, you awaken me. And sometimes awakening means walking away. Many women fear this kind of love because it cannot be controlled. It is too fluid, too wild, too alive. It doesn't reassure, it challenges. It doesn't promise forever. It invites presence. This love asks, can you stay knowing you don't need to? Can you love knowing you might lose? Can you touch without grasping and trust without proof? In every relationship, there comes a moment when the illusion fades, when the fantasy of us is replaced by the truth of two souls standing naked before each other. One may panic, trying to rebuild the dream. The other may breathe deeply, accepting the impermanence. This is the turning point. To cling is to collapse back into illusion. To release is to step into love's real form, unbound, uncertain, yet infinitely alive. Look closely at the moments when you've tried to hold on, the unanswered messages, the need for validation, the constant replay of words that hurt. Each of those was a prayer for control, disguised as affection. But when you stop chasing the echo and sit in silence, something begins to shift. You realize the person you were trying to keep was only a reflection of what you feared losing in yourself. The love that doesn't cling forces you to meet yourself in your loneliness, your longing, your beauty, your madness. It is the teacher that tears away pretense and leaves only presence. And when you learn to love from that place, you stop begging for reassurance. You stop measuring your worth in someone else's gaze. You become the ocean, deep, infinite, and untamed. Watts once said, when you let go of what you are, you become what you might be. To let go of clinging is to return to wholeness. And only from wholeness can love be pure. For love that clings is ownership, but love that flows is liberation. It does not fear endings because it knows there are none. It does not fear distance because it knows that connection is not made of touch, but of consciousness. And maybe that's the paradox. The love that doesn't need to stay stays the longest. Some women confuse letting go with giving up, but they are not the same. Giving up is resignation, the quiet collapse of the soul that whispers, I am not enough. Letting go is sacred. It is the soul's declaration. I trust what is real will remain. The difference between the two is consciousness. One is rooted in fear, the other in awakening. When you love someone from your wounds, you grip. You search for proof, reassurance, patterns that mimic safety. You try to possess the person the way a child clings to their mother's hand in a dark room. But when you love from your wholeness, you release. You understand that no one can give you the sense of self you haven't yet discovered within. You stop needing love to fix you and begin letting love teach you. Detachment in its highest form is devotion without desperation. It is staying connected without dissolving into the other. It is giving your heart but keeping your center. You stop orbiting someone else's gravity and start generating your own. And the moment you do, something remarkable happens. People feel it. Your energy changes. You become magnetic, not because you chase, but because you radiate. Alan Watts often said, you can only love that which you allow to be free. Think about that. To love someone is not to keep them, but to honor their freedom and your own. Anything else is merely control dressed in romance. Most people are terrified of that level of freedom because it dismantles every illusion that love is supposed to make you safe. But love was never meant to be safe. It was meant to make you awake. In awakening, you see the illusion clearly, how attachment disguises itself as loyalty, how dependence parades as intimacy. The woman who begins to see this truth becomes dangerous in the eyes of a world built on validation because she no longer plays the game. She no longer apologizes for her silence. She no longer needs to explain her worth through someone's attention. She walks differently, not with arrogance, but with a serenity that unsettles those still addicted to approval. Men sense this shift too. The woman who does not cling confuses them, fascinates them, terrifies them. She doesn't fight for attention because she's not starving for it. She doesn't demand commitment because her peace doesn't depend on it. Her love becomes an offering, not a transaction. And in that, she becomes irresistible, not because she's trying, but because she's free. But this freedom has a cost. You must first confront the void, the silence left behind when you stop grasping, the nights when you want to reach out but choose stillness instead, the ache of unlearning everything you were told about love, the pain of realizing that so much of what you called connection was really fear in disguise. Yet that void is sacred space, the womb of transformation. The feminine energy in her awakened form doesn't fill silence with noise. She lets it echo until it becomes music. She doesn't chase closure. She lets truth reveal itself in time. She knows that love, when genuine, doesn't vanish when unspoken. It simply changes form. To love without clinging is to see another person not as possession, but as poetry. You don't need to hold the poem to feel its meaning. You don't need to own the art to be moved by it. The experience is the gift. The moment is enough. When you understand that, your entire relationship with love changes. You stop measuring connection in duration and start measuring it in depth. This is not a teaching of coldness, but of warmth, refined by wisdom. You can still love passionately, but with open palms. You can still desire deeply, but without expectation. You can still give, but without erasing yourself. That is the divine paradox. You love more fully when you stop needing the love to complete you. Because what clings cannot see. The eyes of attachment are clouded by fear, but the eyes of awareness see everything. The beauty, the impermanence, the sacred comedy of two souls meeting for a moment in the infinite dance of time. Love that doesn't cling isn't weaker, it's stronger because it doesn't depend on circumstance. It exists beyond possession. It knows that every ending is a continuation, every loss a return. In that truth, something awakens. The realization that love, when pure, is not a contract but a current. And when you stop fighting its flow, it carries you towards something far greater than romance, toward wholeness. There is a quiet kind of woman emerging in the world, the one who no longer mistakes attachment for intimacy. She moves differently now, as if she finally understands that love is not a net to fall into, but an ocean to swim through. This woman no longer asks, "Does he love me?" but instead wonders, "Do I feel free in this love?" That single question shifts the entire axis of her being. Because real love, the kind that doesn't cling, demands self-trust. It asks you to release every illusion that love can be guaranteed, controlled, or proven. You begin to understand that love is not a reward for being enough. It is the natural radiance of an unguarded heart. The more awake you become, the less you try to earn it, and the more you become it. But this awareness doesn't come gently. It comes after the collapse, after the crying into your pillow when you realize the person you clung to was never yours to keep, after the humiliation of begging for attention that only pushed them further away, after the bitterness of realizing how much you gave up trying to be chosen. That is the sacred breaking, the ego shattering under the weight of its own illusions. Psychologists call it the death of the false self. Mystics call it awakening. Either way, it feels like losing everything. But what's really dying is the illusion that love is something you get rather than something you are. When you cling to someone, what you're really clinging to is the version of yourself that believes love can be taken away. You confuse connection with survival and affection with identity. But love that doesn't cling dismantles this illusion. It reminds you that you were whole before you were ever adored, that you existed before you were ever seen, that you mattered before you were ever chosen. This kind of love, pure, spacious, fearless, is the rarest form of intimacy because it doesn't ask the other to complete you, but to meet you. It's not about halves becoming whole, but about two wholes sharing their fullness. It is the love of awakened beings, the kind that doesn't enslave, but liberates. In that space, you realize something profound. To love without clinging is not to stop caring, but to care without fear, to desire without demand, to give without depletion, to stay when it feels right, and to go when it's time without making either a crime. It is the death of codependency and the birth of reverence. Reverence for the other's freedom, reverence for your own boundaries, reverence for the sacred impermanence of everything. You begin to notice how beauty exists because things end, not in spite of it. You stop trying to make love eternal by trapping it. You make it eternal by experiencing it completely in the moment. Alan Watts called this the dance of life, the endless motion of coming together and falling apart. He said we suffer because we try to make the dance static. We want the music to pause at the perfect note. But love isn't meant to freeze. It's meant to move, to evolve, to dissolve, and return in new forms. The more you understand that, the more peaceful you become in love. Not numb, but serene. The Stoics spoke of the same wisdom, though in different words. Hold everything lightly, they said. Love as if it were a bird perched on your hand, ready to fly away at any moment. The wise woman does not grip the bird. She marvels at its song. She knows the joy lies in the encounter, not in the possession. So she learns the art of sacred detachment, to feel deeply but not drown, to open her heart but not abandon her soul, to let someone in without letting them become her oxygen. Because the moment you believe you can't live without someone, you've made them your God. And every idol eventually falls. Love without clinging teaches humility. The humility to accept that nothing belongs to you, not even the person who whispers your name in the dark. The moment you release the need to own, you begin to experience what it means to truly love. It is not lesser, it is luminous. You stop trying to grasp love and start allowing it to pass through you, like sunlight through stained glass. And that, perhaps, is the quiet revolution. When a woman no longer seeks to be possessed, she becomes untouchable in the most beautiful way. Love that doesn't cling doesn't mean coldness. It means consciousness. It is love refined by awareness, by pain transmuted into wisdom. It is the moment you realize that what you once called heartbreak was not the end of love, but the birth of truth. The kind of truth that no longer needs a promise to feel secure. The kind of truth that no longer confuses attention with affection. Most people enter relationships asleep. They don't fall in love with a person. They fall in love with a feeling, a projection, a reflection of what they wish they were. They mistake chemistry for destiny and comfort for connection. They build shrines to the illusion and call it love. But eventually reality intrudes and the illusion cracks. It's in that crack where awakening begins. You start to see that what you thought was love was often control in disguise, that what you called loyalty was sometimes fear of being alone, that what you called compromise was often self-erasure. And so the woman begins to awaken. She starts to unlearn the lies she was taught about love. That devotion means obedience, that passion means pain, that being chosen means being worthy. When she unlearns these illusions, something shifts inside her. The same heart that once broke open with longing now beats with clarity. The same tears that once fell in despair now wash away the remnants of her conditioning. She begins to understand that real love, awakened love, is not a cage, but a mirror. It doesn't demand she shrink. It invites her to expand. Psychology calls this individuation, the process of becoming whole. In relationships, it means she no longer merges blindly into another, losing herself in the name of unity. She stands beside her partner as an equal consciousness, not an emotional echo. This balance of autonomy and connection becomes the foundation of something sacred, mutual respect. In this state, she no longer fears space. Silence no longer feels like punishment. Absence no longer feels like abandonment, because she's learned that distance doesn't kill love. It tests its purity. The love that clings cannot survive silence. It needs noise, reassurance, performance. But the love that doesn't cling thrives in stillness because it is rooted in trust. Alan Watts once said, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." It is so plain and so obvious, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. The same is true for love. Everyone rushes to define it, secure it, prove it, but love in its purest form, simply is. It needs no definition, no guarantee, no chain. And yet the modern world teaches the opposite. It tells women to chase love, to measure their value by how much they are wanted. It celebrates obsession and calls it romance. It glorifies pain and calls it passion. But those narratives are prisons, because when love becomes a transaction, when it's something to win, to keep, to control, it ceases to be love at all. The love that doesn't cling isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or grand declarations. It moves quietly, like breath, steady, alive, unseen, but deeply felt. It doesn't need to prove itself because it exists beyond performance. When you meet this love, it feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. This kind of love doesn't always come in a person. Sometimes it arrives as solitude, the sacred period where you learn to sit with yourself without reaching for distraction. At first it feels unbearable, but slowly it becomes medicine. You begin to see that being alone is not loneliness, it's intimacy with your own soul. From that space, when love does appear again, you recognize it differently. You no longer ask, will you stay? But can we grow? You no longer crave constant reassurance because your worth no longer fluctuates with someone's attention. You stop needing someone to make you feel seen because you have already learned to look at yourself with compassion. This is the paradox Alan Watts so often spoke of, that the moment you stop needing love, you finally become capable of it. The moment you stop clinging, you begin to receive, because love cannot enter where fear has built walls. It flows only where freedom exists. The woman who loves without clinging is not without desire. She simply no longer desires from emptiness. Her affection is no longer a plea for validation, but a celebration of being alive. She doesn't love to be loved back. She loves because it is her nature. Like the sun, she shines not to be admired, but because she cannot help but shine. And that is what makes her love so dangerous. It cannot be controlled. To love without clinging is to stand in the storm and not run for shelter. It is to know that uncertainty is not a threat, but the very essence of being alive. The woman who reaches this understanding becomes untamable, not because she rejects love, but because she refuses to make it her master. The world often misunderstands such women. They call her cold when she's simply calm. They call her distant when she's discerning. They call her complicated when she's just honest enough to no longer pretend. But she's not cold, she's clear, she's not distant, she's grounded, she's not complicated, she's free. Freedom, after all, is the highest form of love. For what is love if it demands your surrender, your silence, your shrinking? That's not love, that's fear disguised as devotion. True love, the kind Alan Watts spoke of, doesn't bind, it awakens. It doesn't tame your wildness, it teaches you how to dance with it. And that dance, the sacred rhythm between two conscious beings, is not about dependency, but harmony. It's not about filling each other's voids, but about expanding each other's light. It's two souls saying, I see you, not because I need you to complete me, but because I choose to witness you as you are. The woman who has learned detachment doesn't stop loving deeply. She loves more deeply than ever before, but with open hands. She doesn't chase closure. She finds peace in understanding. She doesn't fear endings. She honors their timing. And she doesn't demand permanence, because she knows that even the most beautiful flower must eventually return to the earth. You see, when love is free, it stops being about possession and starts being about presence. When you are present, love becomes effortless, not because it lacks depth, but because it no longer fights the current of what is. The struggle disappears, and what remains is something sacred, flow. She now understands that the one who clings is always in the past or the future, replaying memories, anticipating losses. But the one who lets go exists only in the now. and the now is where love truly lives. You cannot love someone tomorrow, and you cannot love them yesterday. You can only love them in this breath, in this glance, in this heartbeat. In this realization, the woman's energy shifts again. Her worth is no longer transactional. Her love is no longer a currency. She no longer asks, what do I mean to him? But what does this love awaken in me? She stops negotiating for her value. She becomes the value. From the outside, her love seems effortless, almost mystical, but it was forged in fire. It was born from heartbreak, from solitude, from the painful unlearning of every illusion. She has cried oceans and stood in her own ashes, and yet from that ruin, she has built a temple of peace. This is the power that frightens men who have only known conditional love. The love that doesn't cling, cannot be manipulated, cannot be begged for, cannot be earned, because it is already complete. It doesn't demand loyalty through fear, but invites it through respect. It doesn't trap, it liberates. And when such a woman loves you, it feels like grace, because she does not love to heal her wounds. She loves to express her wholeness. She doesn't project her fears onto you. She mirrors your truth back to you. She loves not from need, but from abundance. And that abundance awakens something in others, a remembering of what real love feels like. Love that doesn't cling is the rarest love, because it is love without ego. It's what remains when all pretense is stripped away. It doesn't say, you are mine, but you are free, and I love you still. Alan Watts once described life as a piece of music. You don't listen to music just to reach the final note. You dance, you feel, you sway with it, because every moment is complete in itself. The same is true for love. The point is not to reach forever. The point is to experience eternity within each fleeting instant. And so, the woman who knows this no longer clings. She moves through love like wind through trees, touching, transforming, never owning. Her love leaves traces, not chains. Her heart stays open, not because she is naive, but because she understands that love, by its nature, cannot be caged. She no longer fears being alone because she carries the fullness of connection within her. Her solitude is not emptiness, it is sovereignty. She doesn't chase, she chooses. She doesn't beg, she blesses. And the love she gives now, when it flows, is no longer fragile, it is fearless. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.